My name is Lana. I am 32 years old, and on my birthday, my little sister stood up at the dinner table and announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby. 7 years of marriage, 28 years of sisterhood, all of it shattered with one sentence. But what she did not know was that I had been sitting on a secret of my own, a secret about my husband that would change everything. Before I tell you what I revealed that night, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you believe karma always finds its way. Because when I opened my mouth, everyone at that table stopped breathing. From the outside looking in, my life appeared absolutely perfect. I lived in a beautiful two-story house in Highlands Ranch, a quiet suburb located just south of Denver, Colorado. The house had 4 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, with a classic white picket fence and a garden filled with tulips that I planted fresh every single spring. Those tulips were my pride and joy. Every April, I would spend entire weekends on my knees in the dirt, carefully placing each bulb, imagining how gorgeous they would look when they finally bloomed in May. My husband Brandon and I had been married for 7 years when everything fell apart. We met at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue when I was just 25 years old. He was charming, confident, and had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. He was tall with dark hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. We dated for a year and then got married in a small but elegant ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. It was the happiest day of my life, or at least I thought it was. I worked as the human resources manager at a large insurance company headquartered in downtown Denver. It was a demanding position that required long hours and careful attention to detail, but I genuinely loved my work. The salary was excellent, $85,000 annually, which combined with Brandon's income as a loan officer at a regional bank gave us a very comfortable lifestyle. We drove nice vehicles. His was a sleek BMW sedan, while I preferred my practical Honda CR-V. We took vacations to tropical destinations like Hawaii and the beaches of Mexico. Our neighbors on the street often referred to us as the ideal couple, the ones who seemed to have everything figured out. But appearances can be deceiving. Nothing is ever as perfect as it seems from the outside. The one glaring absence in our picture-perfect existence was a child. Brandon and I had been desperately trying to conceive for 5 painful years. 5 years of hope, followed by crushing disappointment, month after month after month. The first year of our marriage, we decided to wait before starting a family. We wanted to establish financial stability, purchase our home, and advance in our respective careers. That decision made complete sense at the time. By the second year, we began trying naturally. I tracked my ovulation cycles religiously. I took my temperature every morning before getting out of bed. I ate healthy foods and avoided alcohol during the times when conception was most likely. And every single month, I would sit in our bathroom holding a pregnancy test, watching for that second line to appear. It never did. Month after month, year after year, just one lonely line staring back at me. By the third year of trying, I scheduled an appointment with a fertility specialist named Dr. Ramirez. She was highly recommended and came with excellent credentials. Over the course of several weeks, she ran every possible test on me. Blood work to check my hormone levels, ultrasounds to examine my reproductive organs, comprehensive panels to identify any underlying conditions that might be preventing conception. After all the poking and prodding was finished, Dr. Ramirez sat me down in her office and delivered news that should have been reassuring, but somehow was not. She said, "There is nothing wrong with you, Lana. Your fertility appears completely normal. You should have no problem conceiving." I should have felt relieved by those words. Instead, I felt deeply confused and somehow even more broken than before. If nothing was medically wrong with me, then why was I unable to get pregnant? What invisible barrier was preventing us from having the family we desperately wanted? I brought up the logical next step with Brandon. I asked him to get tested. Perhaps the issue was with him rather than with me. His reaction surprised me. He flatly refused. He said men did not need those kinds of invasive tests. He claimed it was probably just stress interfering with our efforts, and that we should simply relax and let nature take its course. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe that my husband was being honest with me. So I accepted his explanation and continued blaming myself. By the fourth year, I had grown desperate enough to try more aggressive medical interventions. I convinced Dr. Ramirez to attempt IUI, which stands for intrauterine insemination, using a sample from Brandon. We tried the procedure twice, enduring the discomfort and the expense and the emotional roller coaster of waiting for results. Both attempts failed completely. I cried for days after each negative outcome. Brandon would hold me in his arms and tell me everything would be okay. He said perhaps fate simply did not intend for us to have children. He said we had each other, and that our love was enough. By the fifth year, I raised the possibility of IVF, in vitro fertilization. It was expensive, approximately $15,000 per treatment cycle, but I had been quietly saving money specifically for this purpose. I was willing to do absolutely anything to become a mother. Brandon shut the idea down immediately. He claimed the process was too stressful, too invasive, too risky for my health. He said he could not bear to watch me put my body through such an ordeal. At the time, I interpreted his reluctance as protectiveness, as love. Now I understand it was something else entirely. It was deception. Our marriage began showing visible cracks during those difficult years. Brandon started traveling more frequently for work, often making overnight trips to meet with a branch office located in Colorado Springs, about an hour's drive south of Denver. I worked late at the office more often than necessary, burying myself in employee files and policy documents to avoid confronting the emptiness waiting for me at home. We still shared the same bed every night, but an invisible wall had grown between us. We stopped discussing our future. We stopped talking about children altogether. We simply coexisted, two strangers occupying the same house. And then there was my sister, Brooke. Brooke was 4 years younger than me, 28 years old at the time. Everything happened. She had always been considered the golden child of our family, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She possessed natural blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, striking blue eyes, and stood about 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a figure that attracted attention wherever she went. I was the older sister, the responsible one, who earned good grades and followed all the rules. Brooke was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who received forgiveness for every mistake she ever made. Our parents, Donald and Patricia, had always shown clear favoritism toward Brooke. It was not something they did consciously or maliciously, but the preference was obvious to anyone paying attention. Brooke entered the world after our mother suffered through 2 devastating miscarriages. When she finally arrived, healthy and beautiful, she was treated as a miracle, as a precious gift that needed constant protection and indulgence. I grew up perpetually standing in Brooke's shadow, constantly striving to prove my worth, while never quite feeling like I measured up. I attended college, earned my degree, and built a successful career through hard work and dedication. Brooke dropped out of school after just 1 semester, eventually taking a job as a receptionist at a local spa, and at nearly 30 years old, still lived in an apartment that our parents covered the rent on. She had never supported herself financially for even a single day of her adult life. Our relationship as sisters was complicated at best. On the surface, we maintained an appearance of closeness. We exchanged text messages regularly, met for occasional lunches, and showed up at family gatherings to smile for photographs together. But beneath that pleasant surface, an undercurrent of competition and resentment had always flowed. I never fully trusted Brooke, though I could not have articulated exactly why. It was more of a feeling, a quiet whisper of warning in the back of my mind that I foolishly ignored for far too many years. One moment stands out in my memory as a sign I should have heeded more carefully. It occurred at our family Christmas dinner 2 years before my world collapsed. Brooke had consumed slightly too much wine that evening and made a comment that everyone at the table laughed off as a harmless joke. She said, "You are so incredibly lucky to have Brandon Lana. I truly wish I had met him first." Everyone chuckled politely. Brandon smiled in an awkward way. I forced myself to laugh along and quickly changed the subject. But I never forgot the expression on her face when she spoke those words. The way she looked at my husband with undisguised longing, like he was something she desired, something she fully intended to claim as her own eventually. I should have paid much closer attention to that look. Approximately 2 months before my 32nd birthday, subtle changes began occurring that I could not quite explain. Brandon started traveling to Colorado Springs with increasing frequency, sometimes making the trip 2 or even 3 times during a single week. He always offered the same justification: a major project with the branch office, expansion of their loan portfolio, important meetings that required his physical presence. I had no concrete reason to doubt his explanations. Banking was his profession, and the technical details of his work fell outside my area of expertise. So I accepted what he told me and went about my regular routine. But small inconsistencies started nagging at my attention. One evening in early March, I called Brandon around 9 o'clock while he was supposedly attending a late meeting at the branch office. The phone rang repeatedly with no answer. I tried again 30 minutes later. Still nothing. Finally, close to 11 at night, he returned my call. "Sorry about that," he said casually. "I was stuck in a meeting and could not step away." I listened carefully to the background noise on his end of the call. Complete silence, no murmured voices of colleagues, no shuffling of papers, no ambient sounds of a conference room filled with people. Just dead, empty silence. I asked if everything was okay. He claimed he was simply exhausted and needed to get some sleep. Then he ended the call abruptly. I told myself I was being paranoid, creating problems where none existed. I told myself to trust my husband. Approximately 1 week later, I noticed something else troubling. Brandon had begun deleting text messages from his phone on a regular basis. This was entirely new behavior for him. Previously, his message inbox overflowed with random communications, work-related texts, sports updates from his buddies, promotional messages from various stores and restaurants. Now, when I happened to glance at his phone, the inbox appeared suspiciously empty, almost pristine. I did not confront him about it. I did not snoop through his device. But I registered the change and stored it away in my memory. Then came April, exactly 1 month before my birthday. I was organizing paperwork in the small home office that Brandon used to store his financial documents and files. I needed to locate an insurance statement for our annual tax preparation. I opened the drawer of his desk and shuffled through folders until my hand landed on an envelope I had never encountered before. The return address indicated it came from a medical facility called Rocky Mountain Urology Clinic. My heart rate accelerated immediately. I could not explain the sudden anxiety coursing through my body. Something deep inside compelled me to examine the contents of that envelope. Something whispered that I needed to understand what it contained. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the papers and began reading. Patient name: Brandon Hayes. Procedure performed vasectomy. Date of procedure: June 15th, 3 years prior. I read those words multiple times, I read them again and again, expecting them to somehow rearrange themselves into a different meaning. They did not change. My husband had undergone a vasectomy 3 years earlier. 3 entire years had passed since he made himself permanently sterile. During all that time, I had been crying every month over negative pregnancy tests. I had been subjecting my body to uncomfortable medical examinations. I had been blaming myself for failing to conceive. I had been undergoing painful fertility procedures and begging doctors to identify what was wrong with me. Brandon knew the answer the entire time. He knew precisely why I could not become pregnant, because he had deliberately ensured it would never happen. I sat frozen in that desk chair for what felt like hours. The papers shook violently in my grasp. I could not draw breath. I could not form coherent thoughts. Everything I believed about my marriage, about my husband, about my entire life crumbled into dust and scattered in the wind. Why would he do something so cruel? Why would he allow me to suffer through years of grief and self-blame? Why would he hold me while I wept and assure me everything was fine when he possessed absolute knowledge that he was the sole cause of our childlessness? I wanted to scream until my throat bled raw. I wanted to confront him the moment he walked through our front door. I wanted to hurl those damning papers in his face and demand explanations. But I did not do any of those things. Something restrained me. A voice inside my head counseled patience. Wait. Observe. Gather additional information before making any moves. I had spent years working in human resources, handling sensitive employee disputes, and conducting delicate workplace investigations. I understood the tremendous value of patience in revealing the full truth of any situation. I knew that sometimes the wisest strategy was simply allowing people enough rope to hang themselves. So I carefully returned the papers to their envelope and placed them back exactly where I found them. I wiped away my tears and composed my expression, and I began paying far closer attention to everything my husband said and did. Over the following weeks, I transformed into a detective investigating my own marriage. I scrutinized our joint credit card statements online, examining every single transaction with forensic detail. What I discovered made my stomach turn with nausea. There were charges at restaurants located in Colorado Springs, not casual establishments appropriate for business lunches with colleagues. These were romantic restaurants known for intimate atmospheres, dim lighting, and expensive wine selections. There were charges at a florist, 2 separate bouquet purchases within the span of a single month. I had not received any flowers from Brandon during that period. There was a charge at a jewelry store, a necklace. I had absolutely not received any necklace. Brandon was spending our money on someone else. Someone in Colorado Springs. Someone he was wooing with romantic dinners and beautiful gifts, while I sat alone at home mourning the children we would never have together. I still did not know the identity of this other woman, but I knew beyond any doubt that she existed. And I knew with perfect clarity that my marriage was effectively over. The only remaining question was how I wanted it to end. 2 weeks before my birthday, our family gathered at my parents' house in Lakewood for a Sunday evening dinner. It was supposed to be a casual get-together, nothing elaborate. Just the 5 of us spending quality time as a family. Mum prepared her famous pot roast, the recipe she had perfected over decades. Dad opened a nice bottle of red wine. Everything appeared perfectly normal on the surface. But I was watching now. I noticed everything. Brooke arrived late, which was entirely typical behavior for her. Punctuality had never been among her strengths. What struck me as unusual was her demeanor once she walked through the door. She barely made eye contact with me when offering her greeting. She kept glancing nervously at her phone every few minutes, as though expecting an urgent message, and she kept stealing looks at Brandon. The glances were subtle enough that someone not actively watching might have missed them entirely. A quick peek in his direction when she believed no one was paying attention. A barely perceptible smile curving her lips when he said something amusing. But I caught every single one. Brandon, for his part, appeared to be deliberately avoiding any interaction with Brooke. He positioned himself far from where she sat. He directed no conversation her way. He acted as though she were invisible, a stranger who happened to be present at the table. This struck me as equally strange. At previous family dinners, they had always enjoyed easy rapport. Friendly teasing, harmless jokes, the comfortable banter that develops between in-laws over years of acquaintance. Now they were going to extreme lengths to pretend the other person did not exist. And that obvious pretense revealed far more than they intended. During the meal, our mother made an observation that immediately caught my attention. She studied Brooke's face for a moment and said, "Honey, you look somehow different lately. Are you feeling all right?" Brooke's fork froze midway to her mouth, just for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered and smiled brightly. "I am perfectly fine, Mum. Just tired from work lately." I examined Brooke more closely without being obvious about it. Her face had grown slightly rounder than I remembered. Her midsection, usually flat and toned, displayed a subtle curve barely visible beneath her loose-fitting sweater. Her skin possessed a particular luminosity that I recognized immediately. I had studied that look obsessively during my years of attempting to conceive. I had memorized every possible sign and symptom that might indicate pregnancy. I had scrutinized countless photographs and medical resources, hoping to identify those changes in myself. Brooke was pregnant. I felt absolutely certain of it. I kept my realization entirely to myself. I simply filed the observation away in my mind, another piece of a puzzle I was gradually assembling. I did not yet understand precisely how all the pieces connected, but the emerging picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing by the day. 5 days before my birthday celebration, I made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and necessary. I was going to follow Brandon on his next trip to Colorado Springs. He departed on a Tuesday morning, informing me he had meetings scheduled throughout the day and would likely need to stay overnight. I kissed him goodbye and wished him safe travels, performing the role of the trusting wife with practiced ease. Then I waited exactly 30 minutes before climbing into my own vehicle. I followed his BMW from a careful distance, maintaining several car lengths of separation, as we merged onto Interstate 25 heading south. My pulse raced the entire journey. I had never done anything remotely like this before in my life. I felt like a character in some television crime drama, tailing a suspect toward an inevitable confrontation with ugly truth. Brandon did not drive to the bank's branch office, as he had claimed. Instead, he navigated to an apartment complex situated on the south side of Colorado Springs. The building was modest, with beige stucco exterior walls and a small parking lot, shaded by a few scraggly trees. He parked his BMW, reached into the back seat, and retrieved a bouquet of flowers. Pink roses. Beautiful and romantic. I positioned my Honda across the street and observed through a pair of binoculars I had purchased from Amazon specifically for this purpose. I felt ridiculous. I felt desperate and pathetic. But I absolutely needed to witness the truth with my own eyes. Brandon walked toward a second-floor apartment and pressed the doorbell. The door swung open, and there stood Brooke, my sister, my baby sister, who I had known since the day she entered this world. She stood in the doorway wearing yoga pants and a casual tank top, her blonde hair gathered in a messy ponytail. Her face lit up when she saw Brandon standing there with flowers. She reached up and wrapped both arms around his neck, and then she kissed him. Not a sisterly kiss, not a friendly peck on the cheek between in-laws. A passionate kiss. The kind of kiss you share with someone you have been intimate with many times. The kind of kiss that erases any possibility of innocent explanation. I sat motionless in my car and watched my entire world collapse around me. Every confusing piece suddenly clicked into place. The frequent trips to Colorado Springs, the deleted text messages, the deliberate avoidance of each other at family gatherings, the jewelry and flowers Brandon had been purchasing, the pregnancy symptoms I had noticed in Brooke. My husband was conducting an affair with my own sister, and she was apparently expecting his child. Except she was not, because Brandon was physically incapable of fathering children. He had ensured that outcome 3 years earlier at the Rocky Mountain Urology Clinic. I remained in that parked car for approximately 20 minutes. Tears streamed continuously down my face. My hands gripped the steering wheel with such force that my knuckles turned completely white. Then I retrieved my phone and captured several photographs through the apartment window. I could see them together in the kitchen, laughing about something completely oblivious to my presence across the street. I now possessed all the evidence I required. I drove back to Denver feeling detached from my own body, like I was observing myself from somewhere outside. By the time I arrived home, my tears had dried completely. My overwhelming sadness had transformed into something entirely different. Something harder and sharper. Something that felt almost like power. I was not going to confront Brandon in private. I refused to grant him the opportunity to fabricate excuses to manipulate my perception of reality, to construct some elaborate story about how nothing was as it appeared. My birthday was approaching in just 5 days. Brandon had already made dinner reservations at an upscale Italian restaurant to celebrate. My parents would attend. Brooke would be there. My closest friends were invited. It was going to provide the perfect stage for what I had planned. That night, I telephoned my best friend Darlene and revealed everything. She listened in stunned silence as I described the vasectomy documents, the affair, the pregnancy. When I finished speaking, she asked the obvious question. "What are you going to do about this?" I told her I intended to let them hang themselves with their own lies, and then I would cut the rope. Darlene said she would stand beside me no matter what. I made a photocopy of the vasectomy documents and slipped them into a small envelope that fit perfectly inside my clutch purse. Then I settled in to wait. 4 more days until my birthday arrived. 4 more days until everything changed permanently. The evening of May 12th arrived accompanied by perfect weather. Clear blue skies stretched overhead. A gentle warm breeze stirred the air. The kind of ideal spring night that makes everything feel possible. I selected my favorite red dress for the occasion, the one Brandon always claimed made me look absolutely stunning. I applied my makeup with meticulous care, taking extra time with eyeliner and lipstick until every detail was precisely right. I examined my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes appeared hard and determined. My jaw was set with resolve. I looked like someone preparing for battle. Brandon appeared behind me and rested his hands on my shoulders. "You look beautiful tonight," he said warmly. I smiled at his reflection in the glass. "Thank you, honey." Inside, I felt nothing but frozen contempt. We drove together to Bella Vista, an upscale Italian establishment located in the fashionable Cherry Creek neighborhood of Denver. Brandon had reserved a private dining room specifically for my birthday celebration. As we walked through the entrance, I inhaled deeply and steeled myself for the performance I was about to deliver. My parents had already arrived when we entered the restaurant. Mum embraced me tightly and presented me with a small velvet jewelry box. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said with genuine warmth. Inside the box was a pearl necklace, simple and elegant and clearly expensive. I thanked her sincerely and fastened it around my neck. Dad kissed my cheek and declared that I looked more beautiful with every passing year. Neither of my parents had any inkling of what was about to unfold. None of the gathered guests did. Darlene arrived next with her husband Marcus. She caught my eye across the room and offered an almost imperceptible nod. She was prepared to support me through whatever happened. My other friends, Serena and Tao, appeared shortly after carrying flowers and a beautifully wrapped gift bag. And then Brooke made her entrance. She came alone, wearing a flowing pale pink dress that hung loosely from her shoulders. The style was clearly designed to conceal her midsection. Her hair was perfectly arranged. Her makeup appeared professionally applied. She looked nervous, which struck me as highly unusual. Brooke was never nervous about anything. She had always been the supremely confident one, the sister who commanded every room she entered. But tonight, she could not bring herself to meet my gaze. She offered me a brief hug. "Happy birthday, sis," she said. Her voice sounded strained, unnaturally tight. I returned her embrace. "Thank you so much for coming," I said. I kept my tone warm and sisterly, betraying nothing of what churned beneath the surface. I had apparently become a far better actress than I ever realized. Everyone settled into their seats around the long dining table. I positioned myself in the center with Brandon on my right side and Darlene on my left. Brooke sat directly across from me beside our mother. The waiter appeared and took drink orders from the table. Wine for most of the guests, sparkling water for Brooke. Mum noticed immediately. "You are not having wine tonight?" Brooke. Brooke shook her head with a practiced smile. "I am doing a cleanse right now, trying to be healthier." Mum seemed to accept this explanation. I understood the real reason perfectly. The appetizers arrived, bruschetta topped with fresh tomatoes and calamari fried to golden perfection. Conversation flowed easily around the table as everyone shared stories and laughter. Brandon behaved with exceptional attentiveness toward me throughout the meal. He refilled my water glass without being asked. He touched my hand affectionately. He praised me effusively in front of the assembled guests. "Lana is the most amazing woman I have ever known," he announced to the table. "I consider myself incredibly fortunate to be her husband." Darlene squeezed my knee discreetly beneath the tablecloth. She could see through his performance as clearly as I could. The main courses arrived. I had ordered the mushroom risotto. Brandon selected the filet mignon. Brooke picked listlessly at a simple Caesar salad, barely consuming anything. Her hands trembled slightly whenever she lifted her fork. When we finished eating, the waiter emerged carrying a beautiful chocolate birthday cake decorated with 32 flickering candles. Everyone around the table sang the birthday song. I closed my eyes, made my wish, and extinguished the flames with a single breath. My wish was simple. Grant me the strength required to survive the next hour. The cake was sliced and distributed. I took exactly one bite. The chocolate was rich and delicious, but I could not actually taste it. Every fiber of my being remained focused entirely on what was about to transpire. And then Brooke rose to her feet. She tapped her water glass gently with her knife to attract attention. Can I have everyone's attention for a moment, please?" Conversation ceased immediately. Every face turned toward Brooke. I observed her expression carefully. She looked nervous, but grimly determined. She had clearly rehearsed this moment repeatedly. "I know this evening is supposed to be about Lana's birthday," she began, "and I apologize in advance for stealing some of the spotlight. But I have news that I simply cannot contain any longer." Mum leaned forward eagerly. "What is it?" Honey Brooke positioned her hand on her stomach and smiled. "I am pregnant." Mum gasped loudly. Dad's eyebrows shot upward in surprise. Serena and Tao exchanged startled glances across the table. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Darlene looked directly at me. I maintained a completely neutral expression. "Oh my God," Mum exclaimed. "That is absolutely wonderful news. Congratulations." She began rising from her seat to embrace Brooke. But Brooke held up her hand. "Wait. There is more I need to tell you." The room fell silent once again. I felt Brandon tense noticeably beside me. His hand, previously resting casually on the table, slowly curled into a tight fist. Brooke drew a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell everyone who the father is." She paused dramatically. The silence stretched taut like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. "The father is Brandon." For one eternal moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The words hung suspended in the air like toxic smoke. Then chaos erupted. Mum's face drained of all colour. Dad muttered what the hell under his breath. Serena dropped her fork with a loud clatter against her plate. Theo pressed her hand over her mouth in shock. Marcus looked as though he desperately wished he could disappear. Brooke continued speaking her words, tumbling out in a rapid cascade. "Brandon and I have been in love for over a year now. We never intended for this to happen. It just did. I am truly sorry, Lana. I genuinely am. But you simply cannot control who you fall in love with." She directed her gaze toward me with an expression that might have been genuine remorse, or might have been a skillful imitation of it. Brandon finally managed to speak. His voice emerged hoarse and strained. "Lana, I was planning to tell you. I swear I was. I just could not figure out how." I looked at him, really examined him closely. This man who had shared my bed for 7 years. This man who had embraced me while I wept over negative pregnancy tests. This man who had lied directly to my face every single day of our marriage. I said nothing. I simply stared at him in silence. Mum turned to me with desperate eyes. "Lana, sweetheart, please say something." I lifted my water glass and took a small sip, set it down carefully on the table, looked around at all the shocked faces surrounding me. Then I fixed my gaze on Brandon. "A baby," I said. My voice was calm, unnervingly calm. Brandon nodded quickly. "Yes. I understand this is incredibly difficult to process. But Brooke is carrying my child." I tilted my head slightly to one side. Interesting. Something about my demeanor clearly unsettled everyone at the table. They had expected tears. They had anticipated screaming. They had prepared themselves for dramatic hysteria. My composure confused them completely. Darlene reached over and squeezed my hand in encouragement. She recognized that my moment had finally arrived. I rose to my feet with deliberate slowness. The fabric of my red dress whispered softly in the silence. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto me. I could feel their collective anticipation, their dread, their morbid curiosity about what I might do next. "Brandon," I said, "you are claiming that baby belongs to you?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "Yes, you are completely certain of that." His brow furrowed in confusion. "Of course I am certain." "What kind of question is that?" I reached into my clutch purse and withdrew the envelope I had been carrying for 4 long days. It felt heavier than its physical weight suggested, like it contained the accumulated burden of 3 years of calculated deception. "That is fascinating," I said, "because I have something to share with everyone as well." I placed the envelope on the table directly in front of Brandon. His face went ashen. He recognized it instantly. He knew with absolute certainty what those papers contained. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." He remained frozen in place. His hands stayed motionless at his sides, refusing to touch the envelope. "Fine. I will do it for you." I opened the envelope and extracted the documents inside. I held them up so everyone at the table could observe, though most could not read the small print from their seats. Then I read aloud in a clear, steady voice. Rocky Mountain Urology Clinic. Patient name Brandon Hayes. Procedure performed vasectomy. Date of procedure June 15th, 3 years ago. The room went absolutely still. No one moved. No one breathed. Brooke's mouth fell open. What Mum whispered. "Oh my God." Dad sat in stunned silence, staring at Brandon with an expression of pure disgust. I continued speaking. My husband underwent a vasectomy 3 years ago. He has been sterile for 3 entire years, while I was weeping every single month because I could not get pregnant, while I was blaming myself for our inability to conceive, while I was subjecting myself to painful medical procedures, while I was begging doctors to explain what was wrong with my body. Brandon knew precisely what was wrong, because he deliberately caused it. I turned to face Brooke directly, and apparently he never bothered to inform you about it. Your so-called baby daddy has been shooting blanks for 3 full years. Brooke's face transformed from confusion to absolute horror. No, no, that cannot possibly be true. Brandon, tell her she is lying. Brandon could not respond. He sat there motionless, like a carved statue, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Brandon Brooke screamed. "Tell her." Finally, he managed to speak. His voice emerged barely above a whisper. "It is true. I had a vasectomy." Every trace of colour drained from Brooke's face. She sank back into her chair as though someone had severed her puppet strings. "But you promised," she stammered. "You said you wanted children with me. You said we would build a family together." I observed my sister crumble and felt nothing whatsoever. No satisfaction at her suffering, no triumph at her downfall, just hollow emptiness where my heart used to reside. Mum finally recovered her voice. "Wait. If Brandon cannot father children, then whose baby is Brooke actually carrying?" The question hung suspended in the air. Everyone turned to stare at Brooke. She began sobbing uncontrollably. "I do not know. I do not know." "You do not know," I said flatly. "Exactly how many men have you been sleeping with?" "Only Brandon," she wailed. "I swear to you, we have been together for over a year." I shook my head slowly. "Then either you are lying about Brandon being your only partner, or you became pregnant by someone else and attempted to pass the child off as his. Which explanation is the truth?" "I do not know." Brooke cried. "Maybe there was one other time. I had too much to drink. I cannot even remember his name." The room erupted into chaos. Mum began weeping openly. Dad slammed his fist against the table hard enough to rattle the dishes. Serena and Tao exchanged horrified glances, clearly wishing they were anywhere else on earth. Brandon turned to Brooke with outrage in his eyes. "You cheated on me." The irony was almost too rich to believe. My husband, who had been cheating on me with my own sister, was now furious that she had cheated on him. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Nearly. Instead, I looked at Brandon and spoke with cold precision. "You do not get to be angry. You lied to me for 7 years. You lied to her for however long your affair lasted. You have absolutely no right to portray yourself as a victim here." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off immediately. "I am not finished speaking." I swept my gaze around the table, ensuring everyone heard my next words clearly. I want every person in this room to understand exactly what happened. My husband secretly underwent a vasectomy without my knowledge or consent. He allowed me to spend 3 agonizing years crying over infertility, blaming my own body, enduring medical procedures, feeling like a failure as a woman and as a wife. And throughout all of that suffering, he knew. He knew and deliberately chose to say nothing. Then he began an affair with my sister, and she got pregnant by some random stranger and attempted to trap him by claiming the baby was his. I paused to let my words sink in. The silence was absolute. This is not merely a betrayal of wedding vows, I continued. This is a betrayal of everything sacred between human beings. Trust, family, basic decency. Brandon stood up abruptly. Lana, please, let us discuss this privately. No, you chose to conduct this affair. You chose to lie to me publicly in front of my family for years. Now you can face the consequences in public. I turned to address Brooke directly. And you, my own sister. I spent my entire life feeling inferior to you. Not as pretty, not as charming, not as loved by our parents. But I never imagined you were capable of such cruelty. I never believed you would betray me like this. Brooke could not lift her eyes to meet mine. She sat there, sobbing, mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivulets. I retrieved my clutch purse from the table. I am leaving now. Brandon, do not come home tonight. I am changing the locks first thing tomorrow morning. You will hear from my attorney by the end of this week. Brandon reached toward my arm. Lana, wait. We need to discuss the house, our finances. Everything we have built together. I pulled away sharply from his grasp. Do not touch me. Do not ever touch me again. I looked at my parents one final time. Mum. Dad. I am deeply sorry you had to witness this. I love you both very much. Then I turned and walked out of that restaurant with my head held high. Darlene and Marcus followed immediately behind me. So did Serena and Tao, my real friends, the people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Behind me, I could hear Brooke still weeping. I could hear my mother's broken, confused voice. I could hear my father demanding explanations from Brandon. I did not look back. Not even once. The following morning, I woke alone in the bed that Brandon and I had shared for 5 years. The sheets still carried traces of his cologne. I stripped them from the mattress and threw them directly into the garbage. By 9 o'clock, I was on the phone with a divorce attorney named Amanda Cortez. Her office was located in downtown Denver, and she came highly recommended by a co-worker who had navigated a difficult divorce the previous year. I explained everything to Amanda in detail. The vasectomy performed in secret, the affair with my sister, the public confrontation at the restaurant. She listened without interruption until I finished. Then she provided her professional assessment. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means we cannot cite the affair as legal grounds for dissolving the marriage. However, the deliberate deception regarding the vasectomy could significantly impact how assets are divided and potentially affect alimony determinations. I informed her that I wanted to keep the house. I had contributed the down payment using money I inherited from my grandmother. Amanda assured me she would fight aggressively for that outcome. Brandon attempted to contact me throughout that day. He called my phone 17 separate times. He sent dozens of increasingly desperate text messages. He appeared at the house and pounded on the front door, pleading with me to let him inside so he could explain. I had already changed all the locks exactly as I promised. When he refused to leave the property, I called the police. 2 uniformed officers arrived and informed Brandon that he needed to vacate immediately. He left with his head hanging low, presumably to check himself into some hotel. News of the restaurant confrontation spread rapidly through our social and professional circles. Several co-workers heard various versions of the story and stopped by my office to express support. My supervisor, Mr. Hoffman called me into his office and offered time off if I needed it. I declined, explaining that I preferred to stay occupied with work. Professional responsibilities were the only thing maintaining my sanity. 2 weeks after that catastrophic birthday dinner, my mother telephoned and asked me to visit their house in Lakewood. She said there was something important I needed to know. I drove there with a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I could not imagine what additional revelations might be waiting. I felt as though I had already reached the absolute bottom. Mum and Dad were waiting when I arrived, seated together in the living room. They both appeared significantly older than they had 2 weeks earlier. The stress had visibly aged them. "Please sit down, honey," Mum said gently. "Brooke told us the complete truth." I lowered myself into a chair. "What truth?" Mum drew a deep breath before continuing. "The baby. It is not Brandon's. Obviously that much is clear now. But she finally admitted who the real father is." I waited in silence. It was someone she met at a bar several months ago. A one-night encounter. She does not know his name. She has no way to locate him. She did not even realize she was pregnant until recently. I processed this information carefully. So let me understand correctly. Brooke was conducting an affair with my husband. She also had a random sexual encounter with a complete stranger. She became pregnant and simply assumed it was Brandon's child. And she planned to announce this at my birthday celebration to force Brandon into leaving me for her. Mum nodded, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She believed that if Brandon thought the baby was his, he would divorce you and marry her instead. She wanted your life, Lana. Your home. Your husband. Everything you had worked so hard to build. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The revelation should have surprised me. It should have devastated me further. Instead, I just felt exhausted beyond description. "Where is Brooke now?" I asked. "She is staying with a friend somewhere," Dad answered. "She feels too ashamed to face you." "Good," I said. "She should feel ashamed." We sat together in heavy silence for several moments. Then Mum spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. "I owe you a profound apology, Lana. Your father and I always favored Brooke. We made excuses for her selfish behavior. We enabled her sense of entitlement. And look at the person she became. I am so deeply sorry. It was the first time in my entire life that my mother had acknowledged the favoritism. The first time she had accepted responsibility for its consequences. I felt something loosen slightly in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the first step toward it. Thank you for saying that, Mum. It genuinely means a great deal to me. Over the following month, the divorce proceedings advanced steadily. Amanda Cortez proved worth every dollar of her substantial retainer fee. She fought for my interests like a fierce warrior. When the final settlement was reached, I retained ownership of the house since I could document that the down payment came from my grandmother's inheritance. Brandon was ordered to pay half of the remaining mortgage balance plus 2 years of alimony. His life unraveled in other ways as well. Word spread through his workplace about what he had done. His professional reputation crumbled. Colleagues who once respected him began whispering behind his back. Within 2 months, he requested a transfer to a branch office in Arizona. He needed to start fresh somewhere. No one knew his history. I felt no pleasure at his downfall, but I felt no sympathy either. Regarding Brooke, she gave birth to a baby girl in September. Our parents helped support her because that is what parents do even when their children disappoint them profoundly. I did not attend the delivery. I did not visit the hospital. I was not yet ready to see my sister. I was not certain I ever would be. She sent me a lengthy handwritten letter of apology, 2 full pages filled with excuses, justifications, and pleas for forgiveness. I read through it once and placed it in a drawer. I offered no response. Some wounds cut too deep for words to heal. 6 months following that disastrous birthday dinner, I sat alone in the reading room of my newly redecorated home. I had painted the walls a soothing shade of sage green. I had replaced every piece of furniture that Brandon and I had purchased together. I had transformed the space into something that belonged entirely to me. My life bore no resemblance to what it had been, and for the first time in many years, that felt like a positive development. Work was proceeding exceptionally well. I had earned a promotion to senior HR manager, accompanied by a salary increase to $95,000 annually. My colleagues respected my abilities. My supervisors valued my contributions. I had purpose and direction. I had begun seeing a therapist named Dr. Elaine Foster. Every Tuesday evening, I sat in her comfortable office and unpacked the accumulated trauma of the past 7 years. The lies, the betrayal, the grief of the children I never had, because a man I trusted made that decision unilaterally, without my knowledge or consent. Dr. Foster helped me understand that none of what happened was my fault. I was not excessively trusting. I was not naive or foolish. I was simply a good person who had been systematically deceived by people without conscience. My friendships deepened and strengthened. Darlene and Marcus became regular fixtures at my home for weekend dinners. Serena and Tayo organized a Saturday morning yoga group, and I joined them faithfully every week. I learned an important lesson. When you remove toxic relationships from your life space, opens for healthy ones to flourish. I even started dating again. Nothing serious yet. But I went on several coffee dates with interesting people. I had dinner with a kind man named Elliot, whom I met during a solo vacation to Santa Fe, New Mexico. We exchanged phone numbers and talked occasionally. There was no pressure, no rush. For the first time in my adult life, I was genuinely comfortable being alone. I was comfortable simply being myself. One December evening, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address belonged to Brooke. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened, but something made me hesitate. Inside was a simple card. On the front was a photograph of a baby girl with wispy blonde hair and large blue eyes. On the back, Brooke had written in careful script, "Her name is Emma. I tell her stories about her Aunt Lana all the time. I hope someday you will want to meet her." I sat holding that card for a very long time. I studied Emma's innocent face and experienced something unexpected. Not anger, not lingering resentment, just a quiet sadness for everything that might have been. I was not ready to see Brooke. Perhaps I never would be. But maybe eventually I could meet my niece. Maybe Emma could serve as a bridge towards some form of healing. Or maybe not. I did not need to decide immediately. I placed the card in my drawer alongside Brooke's earlier letter. Then I walked to the window and watched snow falling gently over my garden, blanketing the dormant tulip beds in pristine white. Spring would arrive again. The tulips would bloom once more. And I would still be here, stronger than before. I reflected on everything I had endured. The years of desperately trying to conceive. The devastating discovery of the vasectomy documents. The double betrayal by my husband and my sister. The moment at that birthday dinner when I rose to my feet and spoke the truth. And I arrived at an important realization. The truth had not destroyed my life. The truth had saved it. If I had never discovered those medical papers, I might still be married to Brandon. I might still be wondering why conception eluded me. I might still be living a carefully constructed lie. Instead, I was free. Free from a husband who never truly respected me. free from a sister who never genuinely valued me, free from an existence built entirely on deception. People occasionally ask whether I regret exposing everything so publicly at my birthday dinner. They suggest I could have handled the situation privately. I could have maintained more dignity. I could have spared everyone the humiliation. But here is my response to that. Brandon and Brooke never spared me any humiliation. They humiliated me in private for years. They lied directly to my face. They made me feel fundamentally broken when I was completely whole. They caused me to doubt my own body, my own worth, my own perception of reality. They did not deserve my dignity. They deserved the truth. And the truth set me free. If you are watching this and have experienced betrayal by the people you trusted most, I want you to understand something important. Their betrayal does not define your story. It defines theirs. Your story is determined by what you choose to do next. You can decide to remain a victim forever, or you can decide to become a survivor. You can allow them to define who you are, or you can define yourself on your own terms. I chose to stand up. I chose to speak the truth. I chose to reclaim ownership of my life, and I have never once looked back. So if someone ever attempts to steal your moment, if someone lies to your face and expects you to remain silent, remember this: you possess the power, you possess the truth, and whenever you are ready, you can deploy both to liberate yourself. That is precisely what I did on my 32nd birthday, and it was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever uncovered a secret that completely changed everything you believed? How did you handle that discovery? Leave a comment below and share your experience. Your story might provide strength to someone else facing similar circumstances. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these videos. And if you have not already done so, subscribe to this channel so you never miss future stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Sometimes a single story can provide the courage we need to confront our own truth. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for being part of this community. I wish you strength, healing, and the courage to always choose yourself first. Take good care of yourselves out there. And always remember, your truth is your power. Never allow anyone to take that away from you.